My name is Daniel Brodie from Columbia University in New York, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this terrific symposium on ARDS. This talk will be when and how to use ECMO in the setting of ARDS. These are my disclosures. Relevant to this talk will be some studies that I'll show from both the ECMONet and the Extracorporeal Life Support Organization, or ELSO. So first of all, what is ECMO? This is a rendering of a typical veno-venous setup, which is what we would use in the vast majority of cases of ARDS. And it's a two-site setup, meaning there are two cannulas, one withdrawing blood from the venous system and the other returning it to the venous system. And you can see that one cannula is in the femoral vein, and the pump is through negative pressure pulling the blood out, and then delivering it through positive pressure to what's sometimes referred to as an oxygenator or membrane lung. And it's within that gas exchange occurs. The inset shows you essentially the mats of hollow fibers that are within the gas exchanger. And the gas that's delivered to it goes through the hollow fibers with blood washing over them. And at the interface of the fibers themselves, gas exchange occurs by diffusion. The oxygenated blood with carbon dioxide removed then is returned, in this case, to the right internal jugular vein, a very common setup, and circulates through the body. And so that's veno-venous ECMO. This is a schematic of the various potential physiologic mechanisms for why there might be benefit to using ECMO in the setting of respiratory failure, particularly with ARDS. And obviously, we can, by exchanging gas, minimize hypoxemia and hypercapnia. Can also reduce diaphragm myotrauma, but I would direct your attention to minimizing lung stress and strain. And that's essentially likely the major mechanism of potential benefit, which is being able to decrease volumes, pressures, and even respiratory rate below the standard of care, such that we can decrease the amount of ventilator-induced lung injury beyond the current standard of care. I show this to emphasize that ECMO is not for the faint of heart. This is associated with all manner of complications. On the left, you see the medical or mechanical complications by system, neurologic, pulmonary, and so on. And on the right, you can see device-related complications, both circuit-related and cannula-related. And as you can see, complications are quite common in the use of ECMO. The use of ECMO has also been increasing rather substantially since 2009, when there was the confluence of two major events in the field. One was the influenza A H1N1 pandemic, and the other was the publication of the CESAR trial, which I'll show you in a moment. You can see that primarily the increase has been in adult ECMO, and that it's been split about evenly between adult cardiac and adult respiratory. Since that time, the publication volume in ECMO has also increased dramatically, and the highest level of evidence that we have right now is really for very severe ARDS with randomized controlled trials for veno-venous ECMO. There are some other randomized controlled trials, but the largest and most definitive are in the field of very severe ARDS. This is the CESAR trial that I had mentioned. This is by Giles Peake and colleagues, published in The Lancet in 2009. This is a landmark study in the field with 180 adults randomized to either ECMO or consideration of ECMO if they went to one center, Glenfield Hospital in Leicester in the United Kingdom, as part of a larger management protocol, or remaining in a center where they could provide standard mechanical ventilation. This was patients with severe but potentially reversible respiratory failure. And there was a very large signal for benefit, a 16% absolute reduction in the primary endpoint of death or severe disability at 6 months. And that's a major accomplishment. The only thing is that there were several caveats to this study, not least of which is that those patients in the control group only received lung protective ventilation, 70% of them at any time during their course. And so that would therefore bias the results in favor of the intervention arm and makes it a little bit more difficult to interpret this very positive result. What the CESAR trial did show us is that ECMO is relatively safe, and that there appears to be a benefit of ECMO when performed at an expert center like Glenfield Hospital as part of a larger management algorithm for managing patients with acute respiratory failure. But to really answer the question of whether or not ECMO saves lives in severe ARDS, we turn to the Eolia trial. This is the work of Alain Combs and colleagues. This is a RIVA network and an ECMONet study. And this was a multi-center international randomized controlled trial of 249 adults with ARDS. And I show you the entry criteria here because if we, in the end, believe that there's a positive signal, then these become the accepted indications for using ECMO for ARDS. And the three entry criteria are PDAF ratio less than 50 for at least 3 hours, less than 80 for at least 6 hours, or the third criteria, which perhaps is the most important in post-hoc analysis. There's a suggestion that it is, where the lungs are very stiff and it is very difficult to ventilate them without potentially doing more damage. This is a pH that can't be maintained above 7.25 with a PCO2 less than 60 for at least 6 hours, despite going up on the respiratory rate to 35 and accepting a plateau pressure of up to 32. 124 patients were assigned to receive ECMO, 125 to conventional mechanical ventilation. Of note, 35 of the 125 controls, that's fully 28%, crossed over to ECMO and therefore likely biased the results to the null. On that score, the trial was stopped for futility at the fourth planned sequential interim analysis. So this is the primary endpoint of 60-day mortality, where you can see an 11% reduction in the mortality. That's an absolute reduction, and yet the p-value was 0.087, and so it was not significant. A few things of note: prone positioning was performed over the course of the trial in 90% of the control group, and ultimately in 66% of those in the ECMO group. Bleeding was, not surprisingly, more common in the ECMO group, but stroke was not. With small numbers in both groups, there were actually fewer strokes, both ischemic and hemorrhagic, in the ECMO group. What's interesting is that although it was a negative study, this is one of the two editorials written about Eolia in the New England Journal. This is from David Harrington, the statistical editor, and Jeff Drazen, who at the time was the editor-in-chief. And they said that it's important to remember that we can learn something positive from a negative trial. And based on some of the analyses, they went on to say that ECMO probably has some benefit in this context. And that's a very interesting conclusion after the actual conclusion of the trial was that there's no benefit, is to suggest that there probably is some benefit. And that is the essence of Bayesian thinking. And so Ewan Gallagher led us in this trial published in JAMA several months after the Eolia trial, a post hoc Bayesian analysis of Eolia. And essentially, regardless of your prior beliefs and what you thought of the prior data, whether you were all the way on the left, strongly enthusiastic, or somewhere in the middle, or all the way on the right, strongly skeptical, the posterior probability after Eolia of some benefit was actually quite strong. In fact, across a range of prior assumptions about the probability of benefit from early ECMO, the posterior probability of any mortality benefit, meaning a relative risk less than 1, it's 88 to 99%. There's an 88 to 99% probability that there is some mortality benefit. This is a subsequent systematic review and meta-analysis by Levine and Munshi, Eddie Fan and colleagues. They looked at 5 studies, but they focused on the 2 RCTs as the primary outcome for 60-day mortality. Here you can see that in those 2 RCTs, as it was in the 5 total studies, it favored ECMO with 34% mortality in the ECMO group versus 47% in controls. Alain Combs and Giles Peake led this study in ICM, published recently. It's an individual patient data meta-analysis from the 2 RCTs, again, showing a hazard ratio of 0.65 for mortality in the ECMO group. This is a very recent study that just came out in the Blue Journal by Sachin Sood and colleagues. This is an update of an earlier network meta-analysis by Eddie Fan's group, looking at 34 trials with 9,000 adults with moderate to severe ARDS and looking at different treatments in network meta-analysis for ARDS. The median P/F was 118. They used Sucro values for statistically ranking therapies, and they also used in this study grade methodology to be considered in the ranking. And of note, there were 2 therapies or 2 strategies that came out on top. Prone positioning with low tidal volume ventilation was the best strategy with a high certainty of evidence. And VV ECMO was rated among the best strategies, but with low certainty, given that it had been restricted to the few patients with very severe ARDS. And you can see that here with the favorable relative risk of those 2 primarily. After the post hoc Bayesian analysis, also written by the editors of the journal. This is an editorial written by Roger Lewis, again, statistical editor, and Derek Angus, the critical care editor, who on behalf of JAMA suggests that clinicians and researchers should no longer ask, does ECMO work? Because that question appears to be answered. Instead, they say, the question that should now be asked is by how much does ECMO work, in whom, and at what cost? And I think that after all of that data, that is a very reasonable conclusion. So when should we use ECMO for ARDS? Well, we should use it as part of the standard ARDS management algorithm. Ultimately, we must treat the underlying cause of ARDS, use the bedrock principle, which is lung protective mechanical ventilation, diurese or resuscitate as appropriate, and then in the PDEF less than 150 group, prone positioning is strongly recommended unless contraindicated. Other potential interventions such as neuromuscular blockade and high PEEP strategy have lesser evidence and so on, but if you ultimately meet one of the Eolia criteria and there are no contraindications to ECMO after having performed prone positioning and other maneuvers, then ECMO is recommended. How should we manage COVID-19 related to ARDS? Well, this is a paper we wrote with Eddie Fan and Lancet Respiratory, which was a call for adherence to the current evidence-based algorithm for ARDS until and unless there is evidence to the contrary. And of course, that means following the standard algorithm, including for ECMO. But what is the role of ECMO in COVID-19 related ARDS? Well, there are a few very nice papers out now. I'll show you three of them. This is the experience from Paris, written up by Mathieu Schmidt and colleagues for 5 ICUs in the Paris-Sorbonne University network. They had a 60-day follow-up after ECMO initiation. This is 83 patients, notably 79 of them were from the hospital of La Pitié-Salpêtrière, which is the hospital of Mathieu Schmidt and Alain Combe. This is a stacked bar plot for the estimated probability of mortality at 60 days, showing 31% probability, also with a 36% probability of day 90 mortality. You can see the alive and out of ICU in the dark blue at the top, and those who had died in the bottom. Similarly, we published the international experience through the Extracorporeal Life Support Organization. I want to point out my colleagues Ryan Barbaro, Graham McLaren, and Phil Boonstra, who did tremendous work on this project. We had a registry addendum specifically for COVID-19 and prospectively collected data on the COVID-19 patients. There were 1,035 COVID-19 ECMO patients included from 213 centers across 36 countries. And ultimately, the estimated cumulative incidence of in-hospital mortality, similar to the French study, at 90 days was 37.4%. If you only look at those with a final disposition of death or hospital discharge, it doesn't change the mortality very much at 39%. Again, the stacked bar plot with the best outcomes at the top, discharged home or rehab in orange, and in the salmon color at the bottom, those who died. This, just to show you some of the other large data collection that's going on, this is from Roberto LaRusso's group with the European branch of ELSO, doing a prospective data collection of ECMO for COVID-19. This is looking at March 15th through September 14th, published recently in Intensive Care Medicine. This was 1,531 patients from 177 centers across Europe. You can see at the top the accumulation of patients over time. In the middle, those that are still on ECMO at the time of reporting, and then the trend in deaths with 45% mortality. So with all of that data, how do we use ECMO for ARDS? Ultimately, most of the various approaches are still untested individually. However, because of that, it is very reasonable to adapt some of the protocols from the Eolia trial or the CSER trial as examples. In Eolia, there was percutaneous VV cannulation. A low-dose anticoagulation strategy with unfractionated heparin was chosen. However, in COVID-19, many centers are using higher doses, but that is without direct evidence. For that, APTT of 40 to 55 seconds or anti-10A 0.2 to 0.3 is a typical approach. Blood flow rate and the fraction of delivered oxygen from the membrane lung would target, in the case of Eolia, PaO2 of 65 to 90 or a saturation of greater than 90%. Many centers will accept lower saturations, particularly if oxygen delivery is ensured. Sweep gas flow rates are often targeted for PaCO2 within a relatively normal range. Volume assist control was used in terms of the mechanical ventilator settings for most patients in Eolia. with tidal volume set for a plateau pressure less than or equal to 24, meaning below 25, PEEP of at least 10, typically in the 10 to 15 range. Another alternative in Eolia was pressure control was turned to APRV, really with a P high, again, less than 25, P low of at least 10, with an IDE at 1 to 2. FiO2 of 0.3 to 0.5, and in Eolia we chose a respiratory rate of 10 to 30, although I think most of us typically now use a respiratory rate less than 10 when the patient is not breathing on their own. So with all of that said, when and how should we use ECMO for ARDS? Ultimately, we should follow the current management algorithm for ARDS, using ECMO when appropriate after other measures have been taken. And we should use the current management approach as outlined in Eolia or in other studies that have been done. Thank you very much.